We want to open up the county facilities meeting. We'll start with buildings and grounds and ask for approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Motion by Evelyn, seconded by Fred. Any questions, changes? Call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, Frank.
Mr. Chairman, the first item is the update on the RFP for solar.
I can handle that. Really no significant update for the committee other than that we are working on setting up interviews. Those have not been scheduled yet, but we anticipate having those in April, and then proceeding with a recommendation hopefully at the April committee meeting, which I think is 27th. So that's where we're at. My engineers and also the engineer from Clark Patterson, who is really their solar and energy guy, will be working on summaries of all the information to get that out to the committee members prior to that committee meeting, so that everyone's informed of the rationale behind the recommendation.
Any questions?
I just have a comment. Thank you very much for getting that out in advance. Really appreciate that. It'll be very helpful so we can prepare for that meeting. Thank you, Jeff.
Anyone else? Okay, Frank.
Our second item is an update for Municipal Center security. We have the new security desk in place in the entrance by motor vehicle. The vending machines have been moved around the corner into the county clerk's area. I'm waiting on an insurance certificate to have the glass wall moved back into the county clerk's area, so that'll make more of a lobby area where the vending machines are now. We have inputted all the county employees from all the departments with the exception of maybe a handful. Most of them we have identified their fob number, so it'll be just a matter of activating the number in the system. A few of them will have to come over to my office, and we have a keypad there, and we'll just have to swipe the fob to identify it. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks we'll get that wall moved. We can get the fobs activated. I have received back from all the department heads excuse me, the access that they would like for their employees. We have basically three time zones ranging from 24/7 to 7 to 5, and then 4 to midnight. So once everything is in place, I'll plan on changing the outside cores on the 13 doors on the building, and then we'll be a secure building.
Okay. Any questions for Frank on security? Hearing none. Go ahead, Frank.
Can I just comment that if you happen to come in the DMV entrance, if you find your way that way, the desk that Frank's guys put together, specifically Jeff Woodell, is really quite a fabrication that he did. So he actually it looks just like the desk over at Human Services, and it's quite impressive work. So if you go by there, that was not something we purchased, that was fabricated in-house, and I was impressed. I had no idea it was going to come out so nice, but it is pretty sharp looking.
And Frank, you made mention of the moving of the wall for insurance certificate.
We're waiting on a contract for, we have to have it done by an outside vendor.
Oh, okay, so you need his proof of insurance, okay.
Yeah. The glass has to be cut and the frame's cut.
Okay.
And that's not really impacting anything security-wise, but the vending machines have been moved into that inner area by the clerk's office. So now if somebody wants to go to the vending machine, they have to go into that door through the clerk's. Eventually that wall will be on the other side of the vending machines, so it'll be part of that main entrance area.
Okay.
It really is not holding up anything with security.
Rachel?
I just wanted to compliment you again. I think that entrance looks wonderful. When I didn't want to call attention to it because I wasn't quite sure if it was done in-house or not, but the faux stonework is phenomenal, and I mean it catches your eye. It's really very nice. So
Jeff
good
does
job.
a good job. Thank you.
Okay. And we got the court space expansion update?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The the county and our consultants have gone through final, comments. We've gone through 2 rounds here recently, one in mid-February, which had some comments that I think we reported to committee that we were working through. We came to resolution on those pretty quickly with concurrence of the local court staff and, with the hard work of our engineers and architects from Clark Patterson. Those were submitted to, the OCA architect, Ed Rodman. A couple weeks later, he did come back with some more comments, but relatively minor and easy to address. So, those were immediately, changed into the drawings or accepted as changes and resubmitted to, Mr. Rodman. We're waiting on a final, nod from him and a concurrence and then really an endorsement, from the OCA architect. We're also underway with the request to the, Facilities Review Board of OCA. They have the final approval of the plans as they are now. Initially, we were hoping that meeting would occur in March, and the 4th Judicial District and OCA judges have been flexible and eager to get that review board scheduled. Didn't happen in March in part because of those recent comments from their architect. But we're hoping that occurs sometime in April, and then we'll be back to committee with the next step ahead, which would be the funding and the final design work to get us out to bid. But things are proceeding well, and I'm happy that, you know, with all the stakeholders and staff involved and judges involved, not to mention OCA and the other court-related or the other departments that deal with the courts, we've gotten to a point where we have consensus on the plan as it in its current form, and that's quite a feat by itself. So we're proceeding, you know, and I see nothing stopping the design at this point, or no major changes to design as they stand now.
Any questions?
Well,
Brett?
yeah, what's the anticipated construction start date?
The right now, our plan would be to do final design and be out to bid later this year. And we're anticipating now that we're really gonna be in construction most of 2016 and maybe a little bit into 2017. With the, you know, our early concept back last summer, where we were trying to move quickly and get out to bid, you know, that fall didn't prove viable with all of the outside agencies involved and approvals necessary. So, what we'll do next month, we do have a draft schedule right now as part of our submission to the Facilities Review Board in that request. We have a draft schedule that lays that all out. Until they give us the nod, that schedule is gonna keep changing. It's gonna keep bumping another month, another month, another month. But when we come back to committee, hopefully next month, with the Facility Review Board approval in hand, we will have, at that point, a schedule that we can control, because essentially it's just engineering and architect work and bidding schedules and, you know, contracts, and then getting a contractor on board. At that point, we'll be able to control the schedule from, you know, just an engineering and construction standpoint. We'll have some certainty. Till we get to that point, it's gonna keep, you know, delaying until we get that OCA approval.
So we're gonna need to come up with a plan, temporary plan for 2016?
Yes. And we've
Second quarter.
talked about that some in the stakeholder meetings that we've had, and really determined that we needed to focus on the permanent solution first. And as that concept is being finalized though now, you know, our next step is to focus on, okay, we know the plan that we're gonna do for the final fix with the addition. We know what our anticipated construction schedule is, and we can control that to some degree, and we can even accelerate where we think it's necessary as far as our engineering and architecture effort. At that point, we'll have a better estimate on how many months we need the temporary fix for, and then look at options. You know, early on when the concept was to move quickly and get out to bid and maybe even be ready by January 2016 or early in the spring. Some of our conversations with the local court staff were that, you know, they could absorb some pain, and we could do a lot of inconvenience in a short period of time, so that maybe we don't have to add a lot of space or, you know, have a lot of expense. As that time frame has expanded though, I think now it's, we've gotta have that conversation with the local courts again, 'cause it looks like right now, we're gonna have a new judge and staff, on board January 2016, and operating for a year to probably 18 months, depending on when this OCA. So our plan for those temporary measures has to account for the time frame of that inconvenience, and we'll certainly do it as cheaply as possible through that period. But those are meetings that are gonna have to occur going into April, May, and hopefully we can have a resolution on that in midsummer.
Ron?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. If we could maybe, we can have a report from the county treasurer relative to, the financing and changing interest rates, mean an awful lot. And I was just wondering if you had anything current for us on.
I have a phone conference with our fiscal advisor this afternoon to discuss just that. And I was planning on kind of going to finance next week with a little bit more in-depth on that. I'm not quite ready at this point really to say that, other than the fact that obviously their interest rates are at all-time record lows right now, and the projections are that they're gonna start to climb as the year goes along. So, you know, we're gonna have to sit down. I had a meeting yesterday with Paul, and we talked about this and laid out some strategies, and I think we're gonna talk a little bit more about it at the finance meeting. I'm not quite ready yet, so that's fine.
We also were aggressive with trying to accommodate that, but we were told by OCA not to go to bonding because we needed their approval before that step can happen. So that handcuffed us, and I guess, Jeff, if you could delineate how we move forward. We have to get that approval from Rodman and OCA and the full committee, before we're sanctioned to do the bonding. And
Right.
then, of course, the dynamics of the Clark Patterson giving us a reasonable proximity of where the price is gonna be, so we can know how much to bond.
Right. Hopefully, as I said, if the Facilities Review Board meets in April, we anticipate that with their architect's endorsement prior to going into that review board, that, we don't anticipate any problems with that, because of all the effort that's gone into it to get it to this point now. As soon as we get that approval from the OCA, the Facilities Review Board, we will finalize the estimate, which is already drafted. It's just waiting for, okay, are there any final comments or final conclusions or constraints, you know, addressed by the Facility Review Board that are gonna change the estimate. But essentially, we have the estimates. That's been consistent from our prior numbers we talked about. So we'll finalize the estimate, finalize the schedule. Clark Patterson will also finalize their estimate for the final design phase, and bidding phase, and then also construction inspection, construction and support phase. So we'll have a complete picture of the construction cost, our engineering, architecture, and also construction inspection and construction support costs. That will all be rolled up into that full number. At the same time, we're gonna try and estimate our temporary costs, and I don't know if it's appropriate to have that rolled into the bonding, or whether that would have to be a separate cost. I think the cost would be incidental to the project, so perhaps we'll have to look at that, think of that, Mike, when you meet this afternoon, whether those temporary operational costs can be rolled into that bond. Those all have to be considered. The next board approval would be the funding approval and the contract for the design work, and construction inspection. Once that occurs, we're really it's off into, you know, just the nuts and bolts of engineering and getting draft plans, and we'll hit some milestones where we'll be able to give the committee updates on, you know, the final design, but, after that, it's just a matter of getting the thing built. And, I've talked with Clark Patterson, with John Norris and Matt Smullen, a few times since this really began last summer about where we can accelerate the construction schedule, where we can accelerate, and, you know, they have some good ideas, and they've been talking with some construction management firms and getting some outside, you know, input as well with any, creative ideas on how to accelerate this as quickly as we can. So we'll be using every trick in the book to try and do that.
Jim?
Yeah, Jeff, How much square footage are we gonna need for the second judge to rent? How much?
That's, well, we have the facility, the needs assessment, but I think, you know, that is for a constructed permanent fix. And some of what we have to work with on the judges, with the judges and their staff is, okay, this is a temporary measure. We want them to accept some inconvenience, and they've certainly been, you know, in the discussions we've had, they've been willing to, you know, in the near term, you know, we can have inconvenience. They certainly have inconvenience now. So they're used to that adversity. And I think that's more what we have to talk about. I'm not suggesting that we're gonna have to rent, you know, 8,000 square feet to accommodate this new judge. But we'll either have to do a combination of, some temporary moves and renovations, or we've talked about maybe a temporary building, like an office building where, similar to like schools will have a temporary classroom put out in their yard. You know, that's an option for us. Renting space is an option for us. You know, trying to consolidate and use any temporary space we have in any of the county buildings is all on the table. But until we start having those meetings focused on the temporary measures and really determining on, you know, what inconvenience can they deal with in the short term to minimize the cost. I don't even have a recommendation for you yet. I don't know that we'll need to rent space, or whether it would be more cost effective, you know, as I said, a temporary building on site, or some other combination of, you know, utilizing existing space. You know, there's been mention, you know, utilizing the boardroom in areas, utilizing other office space. Certainly security issues are the primary concern when it comes to any of that. And so we don't know how feasible those are until we have the meetings with the core staff.
And those would be for a year and a half?
Right now, it looks like we're gonna be into early 2017 before we'll be able to occupy that new space, based on what we're looking at now.
If we have to rent, do you have a rough idea what that would cost, or?
Well, the earlier estimates we were talking about with renting space were anywhere from $9 or $10 a square foot up to, you know, 15 to 17.
That would be long, 20 years, but.
Right, and those, yes, certainly when we were talking those numbers before, they were for longer term leases. And, you know, we may be ending up paying more in the short term, or maybe less. Maybe we find a, you know, if we pursue that, maybe there's a property owner who only wants us for a year and is willing to, you know, give a good rate for that year, knowing that they have another tenant coming in at a later date. So there's a lot to work through. We've purposefully suspended that because the focus necessarily has been on the permanent solution. We've had a lot of meetings with courts, and we've had a lot of discussions, but really we made the decision with the working group and our project team that we need to focus on the permanent construction and the permanent renovations, and not distract everyone with the temporary fix, and because really everything would have been based on a lot of assumptions, because we really didn't have an idea of where our schedule was gonna be. As we get closer to getting the final approval, which like I said, hopefully happens the month of April, now we have some certainty on our time frame and can shift gears to the temporary solution.
Travis?
I just wanna say, I find it disturbing that 6 months ago, when we were discussing which path to take, it was estimated a new build would be tight to get done in time for the judge, but it was probably doable. And now we hear today it's going to be a year to 18 months of overlap, and that's a considerable difference in the parameters, and probably make a considerable difference in what the decision would have been 6 months ago. My concern is that the board often operates with information that is changing. Now, you gotta expect that this will happen to a degree, but it seems to me that this was, quite a difference in that occurred now in your estimate in a relatively short time. And, that at the time, we could have been considering, a more permanent solution with utilizing the empty commercial space that everybody was saying is just going begging. In fact, I was at a meeting not too long ago in Queensbury, when Mr. Valenti got up there and said that there's 200,000 square feet of, commercial space in the town of Queensbury begging. So, I mean, we could have moved the, DMV off to, the mall, who's also losing tenants at this point in time, all kinds of different things, and still kept the goal of keeping everybody, here, all the courts here. Now that things have changed, you know, we've been backed into a situation where, you know, we're already going down this road, I guess we can't do anything about it. I just see the same thing happening time after time after time and again. And, it's just like, the Westmount, we're supposed to be closing, on Westmount in May, tomorrow is April. I don't think it's gonna happen, but, you know, these are...
Travis, do
yes.
you have questions, or you're just making a statement?
Well, I am making a
Because
statement.
if you're making a statement, we'll wait till the end of the meeting, and I'd be comfortable, but if you have questions, that's what we're trying to answer, is questions, and move forward. If you have statements, we'll do it at the end, I'll certainly give you all the allotted time.
That's fine. My statement is that I find it disturbing that, to get this information at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Rachel?
I guess I'm just concerned about the, you know, I know we approved, I believe it was the plan to, extend and remodel here at the county. But now that we're talking about some figures, you know, going into 16 and possibly into 17, I guess I'm a little more comfortable knowing that we're gonna really utilize every empty space in this building without adding on additional dollars for a temporary solution. I mean, the number is high, it came with a big sticker shock, it's certainly worth it, you know, and I understand why, but I am concerned now that we're so far along in this process that we're looking at, I guess, once we get the numbers, we'll know more.
I need to preface this, first of all, this is of no fault of the County Board of Supervisors.
Correct.
The submissions and our aggressive tact to move this forward with our engineers and all of us involved in this room was right on target. Our problem existed in New York City with the Office of Court Administration and specifically the architect. And we have no control over that body. We've had Albany and Judge Caruso trying to help. We've had locally Judge Krogman involved vitally with all the local issues. But we handled everything that we had to handle in a timely and aggressive manner to try to avoid this expense. What ends up happening is that New York City really isn't concerned with that expense that we will incur, and they want this permanent solution tackled first before we move forward. So, you know, it's the chicken and the egg as far as how we tackle these problems, and we've chose to tackle the permanent solution. We've been very diligent about moving forward with that, and subsequently we have probably a little bit more extravagant temporary solution. We feel that with what we've had before us, and the way we've approached it, and with the people we have involved, that we will not have much of a problem with the temporary solution. There will be some cost involved with it, not of our own fault because we dragged our feet, but because of different agencies we've had involved, different personalities we've had involved, and different professional opinions, which I find intriguing. And I think we're somewhat of a guinea pig because we're the first one going forward with this, as there was 16 judges appointed through the state, and there's other facilitation that has to be made, and none of them have moved forward according to the two judges, Kokoma and Caruso, as fast as we have. So I think in justification of where we're at with a $16 million project and all the other things that are subliminal to it, that we are handling this as best we can and as diligent as we can. Now, Travis has some great points. If we knew all this, would we have covered all these? But I think we still would have ended up back where we are today, and we still would've had to satisfy New York City with any plan that we submitted.
So I guess and I'm really glad that you explained that, and I'm glad that it's on the record and that gives more of an explanation on why we're at the point we are, but and there's absolutely no reimbursement available, there's nothing that they're offering for,
Yeah.
If I could just chime in, regarding reimbursements, because I wanted to hit on that. One of the things we have to work out is, okay, we've got existing court space that'll continue to be utilized. January 1, we have a new court, or a new judge and his staff coming. We're gonna need some additional square footage, likely that we'll need that. But what we have to work out too is with OCA, is the maintenance in lieu of rent. They do pay a rental rate based on square footage. So I think there are some immediate operational reimbursements through that maintenance in lieu of rent. I'm not sure how the rules work. We've never done this before, where we've rented off-site space, or we've, put a temporary building and then said to OCA, okay, now your square footage has gone up, your maintenance in lieu of rent payment's gonna be higher. I anticipate that if there is an operating court, and a operating court staff that requires additional space, that would be part of the maintenance in lieu of rent, payment. Frank, do you have anything to add on that? You're really most in the loop on that.
Other than there will be a 1-year lapse, or lag, I should say, because we bill them
Based on the prior year.
on the prior year, so
So-
any reimbursement will come the next
Yeah.
year.
So that's something that we have to consider as part of our calculation. And as far as, your concern about using existing space, believe me, my goal and that of the working group that's been working this thus far would be to minimize all of our temporary expenses. I think the judges, Judge Krogman at the lead and the other local judges and their staff, they've been, very flexible, and they've been realistic in not only permanent solution, but they know that there's gonna be some temporary pain and inconvenience. So we're gonna try and minimize those costs, It's just a little bit too early to throw a number at it. We're gonna look at all options though, certainly. And I think, the chairman had hit on one thing that I think is important too. And, all of the other judgeships that were approved across the state, we are the ones that are moving, deliberately, and that in part because of the efforts of the committee, with all the additional committee meetings we've had, and all the longer meetings and the briefings in the boardroom. And there's been a lot of extra effort on the part of the board, certainly, Frank, and the rest of my engineering staff, as well as Clark Patterson, to keep this moving on a very deliberate, and the turnarounds, that we've had on each of the steps. We've had multiple steps occurring even before we've come back to you guys to brief, where we've turned around our comments and revisions on an incredible pace. But we realized with some of the early comments from OCA and their architect that we are the guinea pigs. They are setting a template that's gonna be reflected across all these other judgeships. So some of the scrutiny that we've endured, because we've been wanting to move quickly to avoid those additional costs in 2016, the bad part is we've endured a lot of extra scrutiny, a lot of extra back and forth, and a lot of extra comments from the architects, and they've talked to us about it, because this plan that we have is bare bones. It's gonna be reflected across 15 other judgeships, and they're gonna have an easier process. They're gonna have more temporary costs likely, but as far as their process, they're probably gonna have an easier process, because they're gonna have the example that Warren County has set as their starting point. And, that's something that's been out of our control. We've mitigated the time, delays wherever we can. Unfortunately, a lot of it was out of our control. And I'm with you 100%. We're gonna do everything we can to minimize the temporary expenses. I think the judges and Judge Krogman are certainly on board with that, and he understands, the financial constraints. Part of it is now we can say, here's how long you have to endure this inconvenience. And I think that with that end in sight and the light at the end of the tunnel for them, they'll be able to endure some inconvenience that without that end in sight and that final completion date for the initial construction phase, I think it's difficult for them to accept some inconvenience or some additional operational costs. Certainly, as we know, if we go with some off-site facilities, there's gonna be additional costs, for the other departments that have to bring people to and from those court space. So there's a lot of moving, targets here that we'll try and sort out for the
Mark?
committee.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I understand there's, based on what you both said, there's 15 other judgeships that have been
Again.
approved, something like that. But
I think it was a total of 16, I think I'm.
total 16, we get,
I think
we're
that's
getting one of them.
Oh, yeah.
something like that.
And their timing's the same as ours, they're gonna be in place.
I think they all start January 1st, 2016.
January 1st. But we're the first out of the gate because we're, trying to not get in the situation of long-term rentals to save money.
And not to interrupt you, we also were behind the 8 ball because we wanted to do a court expansion previous to this judge appointment. So this judge appointment exacerbated the situation that we had been postponing for, Judge Krogman says 12, I say 8 years.
Okay, I'm trying to understand, you know, where we're saving money with a $16 million proposal. So I'm just trying to understand how and where the savings actually are. I've got a couple questions. Because the OCA has weighed in and, had issues that we're addressing, and because we're in this situation, would it make sense to take this opportunity to maybe revisit and explore options? We're gonna look at space internally. I understand, Frank, that there's a couple buildings over by, Westmount that are, vacant now that could be possibly used for other departments. There's some space at, social services, that isn't being used. Is there any way to maybe take this opportunity to shuffle some departments over there, free up some space, and try to save some additional cost in that 16 million? And secondly, would it make sense to possibly look at, moving a DMV off-site now that we've got this lag in the process? I believe the DMV in Saratoga is in their mall. I mean, we brought this up before, it was ruled against. I'm bringing it up again just as a topic of discussion since this delay has taken place.
You're referencing it as a delay. I think procedurally, it hasn't gone as fast as we would like it executed. So that, I guess, equates to the word delay, but we have executed each phase and got it to where we need it to be. We were told that March there would be a convenience of that board that would give us an approval as long as we had the architect from New York City, Mr. Rodman's approval. We haven't got that yet. We're hoping it happens in April, but we've done all our submissions and tactically have moved forward. If I hear you correctly, I would ask the committee, my opinion is, you know, we're moving forward and we've clicked off a lot of dominoes that need to be done. If the board thinks it's time to step back and start all over, because that's what I'm hearing, I'd like to hear from the committee first. Ron?
Yeah, no, I don't believe, I believe the board's made a decision in terms of how to move forward. I don't think there's anything that I've heard relative to the timeline that would have changed the option analysis at all. I don't believe there was anything in the option analysis that was time sensitive, that was highlighted as time sensitive. Obviously, you want to move forward in an expeditious manner with these projects. You want to move forward with diligence. The more important, it seems to me, if you're concerned about money, the more important thing at this stage, not that it isn't all important, but the more important thing is the financing. Because every fractional increase in that rate against a number like $16 million over the term of the bond results in a lot of money. So to have that element in place sooner rather than later seems to make an awful lot of sense to me. But no, just, I don't want to
And Ron, just checked with the treasurer's office, a 0.5% increase in the interest rate on the bonding. I believe we were told it's near $3 million of extra cost for over 20-year life of the bond. I think I'm accurately stating.
But there isn't anything, and the other thing is that, so I think that in terms of the concern on the timeline, I think that that's better placed in terms of the financing. The reality is that the option analysis that we went through, I think, was well done. It discussed the strengths and weaknesses of each. the board made a decision, to, stay on campus. It was an explicit decision of the board, to move forward with the project. I think that, we really need to stay focused on doing just that. Would be my 2 cents. And whether you're on campus or off campus, whether you build new space, renovate new space, I think the option analysis showed, at least in terms of the space that we have, that the kind of savings that one thinks one might achieve, in fact, we don't achieve. You can take a building like this, you're talking about structural issues, gut, electrical issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the option analysis looked at all of that. We had professional consultants, our own engineering team, take a look at that. Thought they did a marvelous presentation of all the different options. And as a result of that information, the board made a decision. I think it's a good decision.
Mark?
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't saying start over. What I was saying is that this opportunity to relook the space may have presented itself, and all I was asking for the consideration of the committee was to look at space within the building, which we're doing anyways, we're gonna have to do anyways, and possibly take a look at what's available in the community as a means of potentially bringing that $16 million down. Now, if the committee chooses not to do that, I understand. If this is the plan.
Can you just frame it, are you saying in a temporary solution to involve those, or in a permanent?
If it could work in a temporary situation,
Okay.
it's possible that other departments could instead be moved into that space, which could be a permanent situation, which would open up more space that could possibly be used for this court expansion. That was a premise that we explored a year or so ago. The decision was made not to pursue that. But since we're going through that analysis at this time anyways, to see what's available based on the changing situation, I thought it would be prudent to reinvestigate that and see if this could in fact be done on a permanent basis.
Ron?
I think the short of it is if we want to ask the consultants a question, is the whatever the delay is in months in any way affect the option analysis that was done? That's a yes or a no. And if the answer comes back no, if the answer comes back no, it doesn't affect the option analysis, the alternative analysis, then Mr. Westcott has his answer. And I think, we don't need to debate that. We can just turn to our consultants, say, is it 3 months, 4 months, whatever that delay is, does that in any way affect the analysis you did of the various options? And we'll have our answer.
The question at hand today is when January 1st, 2016 comes, how are we going to accommodate the courts? And so far, what we're hearing from the local courts is we can absorb some pain. We understand things cost money. We understand we've got a new judge, but we can make things work. We can look at alternatives. And I think we have a lot of cooperation locally, and that we're going to be fine. I think that's I don't want to speak for Jeff or Frank, but I think that's the least of our worries, and I believe we can get through that. I think we have to stay focused now with what we have accomplished to date, where we're almost at approval level of the architect. And I think it would be interesting for you to give us the statement that OCA and the architect made, I think to you or Frank, or maybe to our architects, as to who we have to satisfy with this $16 million project. Who is the priority?
Well, their comment is that they are the primary stakeholder in this. So our view has been that there's a lot of stakeholders, and we've tried to get input, and we've had a very good relationship with the local courts, and we've had a response, and the OCA has been responsive, and they've made some special trips up here, and so we appreciate that support and their responsiveness. I'm not sure everybody here agrees that they're the primary stakeholder, but regardless, we've gotten to a point now where we're really we're on the same page with OCA, their architect, local courts, our architects, and engineers, and I think the committee here, and certainly the board. There have been no significant changes in that site plan from the last time you've seen it. We will give an update on the changes that were made. Some things shrunk a little, some things got a little bigger. There hasn't been a big change in the footprint of the building since we've last seen it, but a few things have shifted around. So we'll give certainly the committee an update on that. And as, Chairman just stated, you know, the local courts understand there's gonna be some inconvenience and near-term pain. We're gonna look at all options to minimize that financial, cost to the county, and I think they'll be supportive of that, you know, with an end sight and with an end goal in mind. And we will jam them in wherever we can in existing space, certainly, and minimize that cost. I think in the end, the cost might be less than what you know, we had initially anticipated, based on how flexible they've been and how accommodating they've been to some of the constraints of the county so far.
Fred?
I don't quite understand this, you say an OCA controls when we can go out to bonding, because, I mean, if we didn't have that constraint, it seems to me we'd wanna move to bonding immediately, because all the signs that I've heard is the interest rates are gonna go up, and it will have a very large impact on our total cost. So, has the county attorney looked at that? Can OCA really tell us that we can't go to bonding until they approve?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that. I had a conversation with the judges while they were here and also the OCA representatives, and no, they cannot control when we go to bonding. We can go to bonding anytime we want. The issue is, though, is until they approve the plans, you don't know the final cost.
But you can, if you say our estimate is 16 million, you probably could say with certainty it's not gonna be less than 14 million and borrow that amount, and at least lock in
Right.
those interest rate on that amount.
Yeah, I think you could, and Mike and I, in fact, when we were speaking yesterday, that one of the discussions we had was the timing of all of this, and that's one of the reasons Mike is talking to the fiscal advisor today. We've got time. We'll work through this, and we'll be back to the finance committee, as Mike indicated, with a report. We're very sensitive to the issue of rising interest rates and also timing, and unfortunately, there's a number of issues, as you know, going on in the county right now, all of which impact our finances. So, we're trying to see where everything's gonna land here, and we're hoping that by the time we get to the finance committee, we'll have a better idea.
Jim?
Yeah, I think financing is the most important thing, I agree with Fred. But my concern is with the rental or whatever we're gonna do, that I would think the board of supervisors room would be the best spot, assuming it's big enough, but we may need to do some things ahead of time, and I would hate to see us all of a sudden get to that point and not have enough time to do, like with the, magnet town or whatever you call them, all the things that go into it, building or whatever. I would just like for us to give us enough lead time, otherwise then we're stuck going outside.
I agree, and that's where we're transitioning now, into that temporary solution. I think we can resolve that this summer and, come up with a good plan.
Okay, in the interest of, go ahead, Travis. We just wanna finish up here and move on down with John.
Just on that issue of timing and interest rates, I think we all agree that, the sooner the better on that. But the other part of that is that, there was just this back of the envelope, study done that, if we rent, it's gonna cost us $17 a square foot, and, some renovations in there, it's about a wash. And, I just would think that, knowing that there's a glut of, available space out there, which is also a good thing timing-wise for us to negotiate a lease, rate, and knowing that, the day after that these people, Mr. Sears and others, saw the $17 a square foot number, they came back and says, several of them said, I'll give it to you for $9. So, we probably ought to redo that back of the envelope calculation again, I think, based on numbers that given to us by Mr. Sears and other people, $9 a square foot, knowing that we're gonna have some now additional costs, in the short lease, year to 16, 8 months to, temporary to get into. Just do that whole calculation again, put it out there. It can't take very long to go ahead and do that. Put those numbers out again for consideration. That's all I ask. Thank you.
John?
In terms of bonding, can't we approve, like, the worst-case scenario bonding, but in actuality, the bonding, as long as it's less than that, is okay?
Absolutely.
Anything you can do for binding anticipation notes, or as you go along, or what?
So it's, okay.
Well, the issue will become, you have to, no matter what you do, is adopt a serial bond for a certain amount. You
Right.
certainly would, I would agree with Supervisor Strau, you'd adopt it for the larger amount to be safe. And then, the issue becomes is when do you sell your bonds? Because if you sell your bonds right away, then you got the money, you don't need the bond anticipation note. And I think that's one of the discussions Mike will be having with, the financial advisor, is that we have to look at what the impact is gonna be on the 2016 and 17 budgets of borrowing all this money now versus borrowing some of it or all of it. You know, those are all the analyses that are gonna have to be done, and
Yeah.
we will look at that.
There's gonna be a huge unknown in that, which is what's gonna happen to interest rates in the meantime.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I'm just suggesting that, and I share the same concern as Fred does, that moving forward, if we're concerned about interest rates, maybe it might behoove us to start moving this quicker, but I guess you're gonna have that conversation today.
And
The other thing,
I'm sorry, John. I just wanted to check with the treasurer, that's all being considered, you're,
Yeah, we're looking at all of that, we're looking at, at several scenarios to try to ease the blow here a little bit, and, like I said, I'll be better prepared to talk to finance about this.
the other thing too is, Jeff, if I understood that, starting in January, we might have to accommodate the second judge and everything that goes with that. So we should probably have our house in order by December, right? So that they can move right into this situation, temporary as it may be. And so we're gonna have that conversation and look at our alternatives and what's possible. And I'm sure that maybe even having shifts or even night court or something like that might be in the conversation as well. So, yeah, I guess we gotta kinda move along pretty quickly to get there, because December will be here before you know it.
I agree.
Rachel?
I think what we're hearing is really positive news, that it's of no fault of what we've done as a board, but that we're setting a best practices. We're looking at maximizing all the internal space, and correct me if I'm wrong anywhere here, but that the judges are being very flexible and creative in what their short-term solution would be that they normally would not accept as a long-term solution. So moving into this, we've got, everybody working together on the same page, and what made me jumpy was listening to the leasing options and going back out and repricing things. And I think, you know, at this point, I won't be here for finance next week, but I really am, encouraged to hear all of the progress, and that we aren't going to see that increase in our costs. So, and that maintenance in lieu of rent, that if we can increase revenue by any small amount, I think that's a positive thing, and every dollar counts, right? So, thank you for that explanation.
Mark?
So to final comment, I, agree every dollar counts, and, we do need to get moving forward on the bonding. So Treasurer Swan will be presenting his options, and I agree we need to move forward with that. My suggestions to take a hard look at the current situation is intended solely to try to find ways to save money. Every dollar does count. And so, with that said, I assume that would take place anyways, regardless of what is ultimately bonded. We're not, we make a decision to bond at a certain number, it doesn't mean that we can't find savings down the road and save some money on the cost of that facility, and that's what I'm asking for through this process. Thank you.
I just have one more comment, just to, make sure this isn't missed. We talked about the fact that there was, I believe, 16 judges approved in the state, and that we're really first out the gates. I don't want, anyone to come away with the impression that we moved hastily, or that other counties are moving slowly. They certainly have different constraints, they have different conditions, they have, different, local court staffs, they have, different facilities, and they may have other options already in line. And I think the chairman mentioned the fact that even going into this year, before this additional court was approved, we had constraints that had been identified early in the 2000s that we were already, undersized for our existing courts. So the urgency for Warren County was compounded, you know, not only by this new judge and their staff, but all the existing problems that we've been enduring, and the local courts and their staff have been enduring and managing over the past year, that has been recognized by the board from, I think, as early as 2004, 2005, one of the earlier reports. So we did have that urgency, because of our existing constraints that once a new judge was piled on top of that, I think the committee and the board has been prudent in moving as quickly as practical and really, doing a thorough but deliberate and fast, analysis to get underway. It's not to suggest, there may be other counties that have determined that they have other options and they're pursuing that because they haven't had the constraints and they haven't had the undersized court, space that we've been, dealing with for the past 10, 11 years, at least.
Okay, and I think that should finish it up. Is everyone satisfied? All right, and that'll conclude, you have anything else? Anyone else have anything come before Buildings and Grounds, and we'll move to the airport?
I guess just one other question.
Sure.
It's not clear to me what's happening with Judge Krogman. As I understand it, he's reaching the mandatory age, but he can be recertified for 2 years at a time, and then in the meantime, we're gonna elect another judge. Is he not gonna have chambers, Judge Krogman? The new judge will take those chambers?
That's been discussed, that's a likely possibility, and that was, in the needs assessment, that was, submitted and, incorporated in, moving forward. And, some of the discussions that we had was versatility and court space, et cetera, and that was some of the dynamics I think Jeff and Clark Patterson just handled recently, as to whether or not we need jury boxes in the family court area and interchangeability and all that flexibility. And Frank, do you wanna speak more to it than myself?
My understanding, though, is if Judge Krogman does decide to stay, we are obligated to provide him with chambers and space, so.
I mean, really, then you have 3 Supreme Court judges, Bauer, Krogman, and whoever we elect, right?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item on the agenda is a request to address the committee by Mr. Thomas Clement.
Hey, Tom, sorry to make you wait so long.
Quite okay, very interesting. I happen to have a stake in the courthouse, so I'm glad we're at the facilities. Glad to thank you very much for just a few minutes. I know most of you, and I hope to meet others of you in the future. I'm an attorney here in Glens Falls. I was an assistant county attorney back in the day, but my real passion is flying. I'm a local pilot. I'm a member of the Glens Falls Pilots and Owners Association. And I call to your attention today the fact that a prominent member of our community died a little less than a year ago, Mr. John Michaels. Many of you knew him on boards. Mr. Conover probably knew him as a resident of the town of Bolton. Others of you served with him on boards. I think he was on the Economic Development Committee, some of those organizations. We knew him as pilots, as a fellow pilot. And he was a particularly prominent Angel Flight pilot. They have records that he did over 125 Angel Flights, taking patients from Glens Falls and other airports to medical appointments here and there. So he had a very, very big heart, and that's what we recognize. We'd like to remember him in some way, and it's occurred to us that there's a road that's on county property out by the airport. It's the road that goes by the bus garage. It takes you to where the new north hangars are, the north T hangars are. And I've always noticed that road has no name. I've tried to give people directions to it sometimes, and it's the road with no name. I'm thinking this would be a fitting time to name that road after John Michaels in his memory. We've checked with the family. The family has no objections. As a matter of fact, they suggested that it be named John Michaels Way. I kind of like the ring of that because it talks about his way of doing business, his way of contributing to the community. As I said, it's on county property. It's not on town property, so I don't think there's any approval of the town of Queensbury necessary. I think it's on your airport property. You can call it whatever you want. If there is a resolution of this committee and it goes to the Board of Supervisors to approve of this, I'm going to try to have the Glens Falls Pilots and Owners Association, from their coffers, pay for the cost of a street sign and putting that street sign up. And I think we would also check with the Queensbury Town Highway Department to make sure that any sign that's purchased meets their standards and it looks like any of the other good street signs in Queensbury. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll take any questions if anybody has any.
Questions from the committee or any other supervisors? John?
I'm surprised, Tom. I think the 911 system requires all roads, driveways, private and otherwise, to be identified and identifiable. And so I'm surprised that this doesn't have a name. I'm certainly not opposed to what's being proposed here, and I have to agree that, John Michaels and his Angel Flights is deserving of credit and notice.
Anyone else? Jeff?
Just, to that effect, I believe the road is considered a driveway and not a road. Greater Glens Falls Transit probably has a Queensbury Avenue address for 911 purposes. I don't believe our terminal road has a name on it, does it, Ross? Because it's a driveway. So I think, Mr. Clements is correct that this would fall under the purview of the county solely as far as, naming this, like we could name any county driveway. It is not on the highway system. It is not a town or a county highway. It is a driveway, and I think that we'll certainly run that by the county attorney, but I think, Warren County has the authority to name it.
It's conceivable to me that the sign might have to have a little, private drive notation on that you see on some of them.
But it's on public property.
Mark?
I just want to comment, Tom, thank you for being here this morning. This is a fitting tribute, and totally support it in whatever way it needs to be done. John Michaels was a wonderful man and wonderful member of our community, and I personally know people that benefited from his Angel Flights. So I think this is a fitting tribute to him, and support it wholeheartedly.
Would there be any kind of objection for a motion to go forward by the committees? Anyone have that? They want to speak now? Ron, you have a?
Well, I certainly would introduce that as a motion, that, so designate, this lane as John Michael's Way.
That seconded by Mark Westcott. Okay, any other discussion on the issue? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, next item on the agenda is a resolution request to apply for a grant with the FAA New York State DOT. This is for the runway 119 extension, environmental assessment, and preliminary engineering. The total dollar amount involved is $600,000, and that carries with it a $30,000 local share. On page 3 of your packet is the program narrative. It has a few of the bulleted, major items for the project included there. And then on page 4 of your packet, we have a list of some of the time-sensitive tasks for this next project for the environmental assessment phase 3. It includes some additional wetland delineation, additional marl fen delineation, some survey for rare plants, and survey for northern long-eared bats. On the next page of your packet is the resolution request form. This goes along with the grant application. This is to increase that capital project by $30,000, the amount of our local share, so that we could proceed with those time-sensitive tasks. The reason why those are time-sensitive is because we're not certain when we'll actually receive a grant from the FAA. It could happen July, August, could be as late as the end of September. So in order for us to accomplish these tasks in a timely fashion to move the project forward, we're looking to increase the project by the amount of our local share so that we can move forward with this time-sensitive work.
Okay, discussion? Mark?
On page 3, the Part 4 program, the benefits anticipated state that the runway extension is needed to provide the required length for current and anticipated aircraft traffic. Could you tell me what the current traffic is and what the anticipated traffic is?
Well, that has all been included in the analysis in the environmental assessment and the purpose and need statement of the environmental assessment. The current aircraft that needs the runway extension is a fleet of aircraft. It's a group of aircraft. Several different aircraft were included in that design, and their operations have exceeded the substantial use threshold considered by the FAA, justifying the project.
Anything else, Mark?
I'm sorry, I think this means how many aircraft actually use that runway, doesn't it? No, Evelyn? Says, provide required length for current and anticipated aircraft traffic.
It's It's a combination of both the aircraft types, which types of aircraft
It's a
need
combination of
more
both.
runway, and how often are they currently operating at the airport? And is that projected to grow? Is that growth projected? And the FAA has terminal area forecast, which projects about approximately a 3% annual growth in traffic.
Okay, so what does it mean by anticipated aircraft traffic? Could you just tell me what's anticipated? I'm just trying to understand
Yeah,
how
that-
this is used and by what aircraft.
That's used, there's a FAA forecast model that's used by the consultants to develop the forecasted growth. I would have to ask our consultants to provide more detailed information on it. It's a computer model that's used. I'm not an expert in that, so I really can't give you the specifics I think that you're looking for.
Jeff have a little more on it?
I think the other part of that is we anticipate that the current users will continue to use the airport. And there is current use that meets the thresholds the FAA has set for this project. We anticipate that the current use will continue.
Any other questions, John?
Not necessarily a question, but an observation of support, is the fastest growing segment of the, airplane industry is the business jet. And business jets, a maximum takeoff weights for landing and takeoff purposes find a 5,000-foot runway very limiting, and 6,000-foot runway very accommodating. So if you're gonna accommodate the future, which is the business jet industry, among other things, because the freight jet industry is also a part of the future and is better accommodated by a longer runway, that if we're looking to the future and wanna support the future and open doors of economic opportunity, that we support this as we go forward, so, you know, when the conversation's done, I'll make a motion to approve and move this forward.
Other discussion? Rachel?
I have a question about the grant, the 30,000 of our share. Is that all cash, or can that be in kind, or how do we break up that match money?
Well, it depends on the particular project. There are instances where we can do in-kind services. That has to be all approved in advance during the grant application process. This particular project is environmental, it's planning, it's engineering. There's not a lot of work that the county, that I can foresee us doing. Some of the administrative expense, we can seek reimbursement for, which we do. We do include, the maximum allowable administrative expense for reimbursement. Essentially, that comes off of what our local share is.
Okay.
Because we're providing administrative support for the project as well. But for this particular project, it's difficult to do a significant amount of in-kind services.
But we'll see some.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Well,
Fred?
this is all environmental, looking at lady slippers and elk sedge and wetlands, long-eared bat. I mean, is this all stuff we have to contract for?
Well, that's right, and as Ross said, this is a subset of the bigger scope. This is the stuff that we don't wanna miss this summer season, because you have to do these delineations during the growing season. And that's why, Ross had pulled these out and recommended that we go ahead and move the 30,000 in so that we can initiate this work this summer.
Who's mandating this? Is it DEC or EPA?
Well, what got us here, this phase 3 of this project was actually recommended by the FAA. As everyone knows, we've been coordinating with the DEC. We've had some early coordination meetings. And the reason we're at a phase 3 point is because the FAA doesn't want to write a determination on the environmental assessment, the federal environmental assessment, without knowing whether or not the DEC and Army Corps of Engineers will permit the project. So that permitting process could alter the environmental document enough to the point where it could cause some issues for the FAA. What this project does is it incorporates a heavy design effort, about 30% design effort, with the final environmental work for the FAA and the participation process, along with the permitting application with the DEC and Army Corps of Engineers. Those will now move forward simultaneously, allow the project to advance in a timely fashion, and provide the DEC with the information they need to provide us an answer on permitting for this project.
Okay. John, you said you would make the motion to get it on the floor
Yes.
to approve this. Do we have a second? By Ron. Any more discussion? Mark?
I'm gonna vote no to this because, I would just like to know what current and anticipated air traffic air traffic there's gonna be for this project, and I didn't think that was a difficult question, but, since I didn't get an answer, I'm gonna vote no.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, I thought the answer that I heard was that we expect the current to continue and the anticipated is 3% a year increases.
What's the current?
I don't have the EA in front of me, but I can certainly forward to you all of the same EA documents that have been distributed repeatedly. That's part of that needs assessment, that purpose and needs assessment. That's, if I had it in front of me, I would read it to you.
Okay.
We can follow up, certainly, it's the same document that you've distributed repeatedly.
Okay, any other discussion? Rachel?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think we had been provided with that information previously, and I know when I met with Ross, he went over that formula with me. So I'm incredibly comfortable with it, knowing that it's a combination of not only the type of the aircraft, but also the traffic, going through and that increase of that 3%. I know we've met and talked about the formula before, but this isn't new. So, you know, I would definitely support
And Ross, am I correct? We wouldn't be to this point if the FAA didn't say we met those thresholds and they weren't authenticated
That's
from the original application, so.
Right.
Any other discussion?
Are we moving the grant app and the capital project together? Ross talked about them together, I just wanted to. I think that. Okay.
Pardon?
I think
Yes.
that's.
Okay, for clarity's sake, we're gonna do the grant number 2 and 5?
And the increase to capital project.
Yep, 2 resolution request forms. One is to apply for the grant for Phase 3 of the environmental assessment and preliminary engineering. And the other resolution request is on page 5, is to increase that capital project by the amount of our local share, the 30,000 for the Phase 3 environmental.
Okay, John, and you're clear with that?
Yes,
And the
that's
second,
correct.
Ron, you're clear with that? Any other discussion on that and the clarity of that? Okay, call the question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
So moved.
Okay, next action item on your agenda is a request to apply for a grant with the FAA, New York State DOT. This is for the land and easement acquisition for the approach end to runway 30, Phase 2. The total dollar amount involved is $1,120,000 with a local match of about $56,000. This is that obstruction removal project off the approach end of runway 30. Page 7 of your packet includes the program narrative. Nothing has substantially changed with the project. On page 8, I've included a map. I put this in here this morning. This depicts the land and easement that we are to acquire for this project. Again, I've spoken with the landowners. Nothing has changed, no updates. Everybody is agreeable with moving forward as is. And this will allow us to apply for the grant to actually acquire the land and easements. The FAA is currently writing the determination for the environmental assessment that will pave the way for this project.
Any discussion? John?
And Ross, this too creates the potential for 2 of the lateral lots to be available to the county for sale in the future for light industrial and other uses.
Yeah, that is correct. It's always been my intent that any land that is not used for aviation purposes could then be subdivided in the future and marketed for various purposes that are non-aviation related, particularly this project, because the parcels are across a public road, so they're not well suited for aviation purposes other than protecting the approach to runway 30.
And more than likely to exceed the 56,000 local share in many ways. And not only that, bring good jobs to the area.
Rachel, you had a question?
I did. You know, in the last couple of days, I've had some people ask me about the legacy cost as it relates to the extension. So as we're talking about clearing land and what would be, you know, the cost down the road after this grant. And I think, Ross, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I spoke briefly with our treasurer, but I told him I would find out an answer today. And I think I have it right, but I'm not sure. I think you told me the legacy cost after we get through all this is around $2,700 or $3,000, you know, the additional mowing and things like that a year. Is that about what?
I don't remember the exact number, but yeah, we took a look at that for the runway extension, not necessarily for this project, but for the runway extension, we did look at that. There was some additional mowing, some additional pavement and painting, some light maintenance.
Okay.
some incremental costs, I would certainly categorize them as minor.
So just to clarify, and I thought it was somewhat related, so I apologize if I'm now getting off track, since I've got your ear. So that 2,700, say, call it $3,000, when we, and Mike, guide me through this again, because we talked, when you divide that against the property owners in the county and the tax levy, we're looking at less than a penny per, tax fare, right?
$3,000, yeah.
So, I've heard a lot about how much this is costing the county and our taxpayers in terms of legacy costs, and what I wanted to clarify is it's less than a penny. So that would be correct, Jeff and Ralph?
Yeah, for the runway extension, again, there's not a lot of additional maintenance that will be required
Okay.
once the project is complete. We already own the property in that area. Actually, our maintenance might even be easier for us to maintain, because we'll be navigating fewer wetlands and drainage ditches, because that'll be redesigned, so it'll probably be more efficient.
Okay, and that's only as it relates to the
But
extension?
Only as it relates to the extension, yeah. This particular project, the runway 30 end, we're looking at clearing about 11 acres of trees. That area will need to be mowed in the future. So we'll be mowing those areas, but with our setups, with our tractors, we have, triple flail tractors with a 22-foot cutting swath. We can mow that fairly quickly. It's not a very large addition to what we're already maintaining,
So as it relates to obstruction removal, it's even less than that penny?
probably.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the total dollar amount is $1,120,000. That's paid for by mostly the FAA,
90%, yeah.
90%, which are federal excise taxes on aviation charges, which all consumers pay. The local share is $56,000, as Supervisor Stroud just mentioned. Is that right?
Yes.
The local share would be 5%, that works out to $56,000. And I just heard that this land, which is federal aviation money primarily, that I thought was for airports, is potentially going to be land that then Warren County might be able to use for other purposes than aviation? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, all the county needs is the clearing the right of way for obstruction for flight safety. On the lateral sides are properties that we might not need in the future that can create lots that, as you know, around the airport is a light industrial zone, could be sold for light industrial purposes.
Jeff?
What's important to know regarding that is that there are constraints on, the revenue streams and where those revenues go. And the FAA recognizes that there are difficulties in purchasing private property adjacent to, airports. There are some rules that really, at the federal level, protect property owners regarding segmenting, parcels and breaking parcels, against the wishes of the property owner, and there's rules to protect them, and that's certainly in play here. If there is some development and some land leases for private purposes on those parcels, they can be light industrial, they can be a lot of different, categories. That revenue would come back and reduce the operating costs at the airport. So the FAA recognizes, the need. They recognize the constraints when dealing with private property owners and have a lot of rules in place that we have to follow. And they also recognize that, hey, if we can effectuate the acquisition of necessary parcels, as this does, and also generate new revenue streams to offset operating expenses at the airport, then it's a win-win for the property owners, the airport, and they're in favor of it, and they encourage it, because they know airports like ours are, they're necessary to the system, but it is very difficult to have an airport like ours break even, and very, very few, if any, do, unless they are in major metropolitan areas. So this is viewed favorably, in fact, by the FAA, that those parcels be redeveloped and used to generate revenue. Our preference around the airport is always to have something that's gonna enhance the airport itself. But really, we're not constrained on those parcels to be able to offer any type of business that opportunity.
Ron? I'm sorry, Mark, I'll get back to you.
Yeah,
I
thank you,
apologize.
Mr. Chairman. No,
No.
no apology necessary. Go ahead, Ron. Yeah.
I think that, there isn't anything more important in terms of the future viability of an airport and its program than the, protection of the, flight paths and the, protection zones, and I think the, to utilize, this grant to, acquire lands and navigation easements, only enhances, the airport. It ensures that the, there are no hindrances to aviation, and that whatever land use is, as Supervisor Schow has pointed out, is put there, is compatible, not only in terms of, height, but also use. And I think it's a wise investment, and I think anytime we have an opportunity through the FAA, to do this kind of thing around the airport, we should jump at the chance. A lot of airports, didn't do this. The development pushed in on them and created all kinds of issues, conflicts, not only in terms of height, but noise and other types of spaces, and we should learn from that. We don't need to go very far to see those airports. Some of us have flown into those airports, and so anytime we have an opportunity to do this type of thing, I would encourage that we do it.
Mark? Question on the, property. How many acres are we talking? Is it in here? And what's the, assessed value of that land?
I don't recall the assessed value of the property. The purchase price is based on fair market value, not assessed value. The total number of acres, I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head. It's been a while since I looked at
Yeah.
it.
I was just trying to understand why the
Doug,
FAA thought that was a
not to
big deal.
interrupt, but Doug says he knows the amount of acreage.
Well, I believe it's, 52 acres, and I believe the assessed value is around 108,000, so, that's a,
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to comment too, if I get a chance, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I think you're all set, yeah.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about over $1 million for the east-west runway. Now, from all the discussion we've had about how much it's used, it's used less than 2% of all the flights. That's what I've been told by Ross and by other people. So we're talking about over $1 million we're gonna spend, which is federal money, state money, and county money, okay? All taxes / fees, all right? The government doesn't create revenue. They get revenue through taxes and fees. And so, I think it's very prudent on our part to get the maximum value for each and every tax dollar. Now, this particular piece of land has a history, we all know. The county bought the navigation rights to part of this back in 1942. County lost the map. The landowner, who will be purchasing the land from the navigation rights, has referred to the map, though, in consequential land purchases down the road. I always personally thought that we had a solid case. I know that's contrary to our county's attorney's opinion, but I felt we had a solid case in pursuing our navigation easement rights that we purchased back in 1942. But that being said, this has progressed. So now, here we are, March 31st, 2015. We're gonna spend over $1 million. We're gonna be a taxpayer in Washington County. We're gonna own 52 acres in Washington County, which personally, I don't wanna be a taxpayer in Washington County. Nothing against the fine neighbors, but I don't wanna be a taxpayer to them. We've exceeded the safety requirements, as Mr. Stroud mentioned, there's additional pieces of land here we're purchasing that we may resell. So, we are purchasing this, and it's been quoted, because the individual landowner didn't want to sell us the navigation rights. He said, you can buy all the land. Okay, so I guess we thought, all right, let's just buy all the land, then maybe we'll sell some off down the road, but we'll satisfy the safety issues. So I'm very troubled by the course of events and the pattern that we've taken here to spend, you know, we pretend like the $1 million is nothing. Well, I think that's a lot of money, and it's a lot of money, both the FAA, the state, and county money. So, you know, I think we need to be really looking at this as is this the prudent course we want to take? I think we can do this much less expensively. I don't believe we have to purchase the 52 acres of land just because the landowner wants us to. You know, yeah, I'd want it too. If I had land assessed at $108,000, I think I'd want to get about $1 million for it too. You know, so I think we just need to kind of step back here a little bit and really determine whether we need to purchase as much as what we're doing. And do we really want to be taxpayers in Washington County? I know I don't. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm, not to start a debate, but I think it's important to note for the record that the very specific process that all governments are required to go through relative to property acquisition, very specific process, all of which to protect the interests of the property owner from an adverse taking without compensation, without proper compensation. There's appeals within that process. The attorney could go on probably for an hour, not only about that process, but how that works with FAA. I think it's important to also note for the record that FAA judges this an important acquisition, or I don't believe that we would be receiving this amount of FAA monies. So they've clearly identified this as very important to the airport's program now and in the future, and or they wouldn't be approving the grant. This is not, you know, found money. This is not money that we just found laying on the ground. This is money that was advanced from the FAA for this specific purpose.
John?
Yes, I found in my notes, I forgot I had with me on the airport, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of notes. But in this particular instance, the lots that would be created by this purchase would be 19.4 and 31. So you're talking about substantial lots where substantial development could occur. So if you're looking at $56,000 of taxpayer money being invested in this, I think it's one of the best investments we can make, because you're going to make a huge return. Not only, and I suppose you could argue this, that number one is the safety of the pilots and the passengers and the airplanes and the community is number one. But you can also argue that this investment is going to repay itself many times over in the future by selling the 2 lots immediately, but in the long run in many other ways.
Jeff?
I just wanted to comment that, make sure the committee's aware, this is really the final step for the acquisition. The debate about the map and any filings that the Department of War would have done back in 1942 had been discussed. The valuations on the parcels have been discussed and the appraisal reports. Those have been approved, so this is a follow-through on multiple prior resolutions approved by the board. This is the final step. This just basically takes the money for the acquisition, puts it into the project so that we can close on the properties and then move forward with the actual obstruction removal. So I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware that this isn't a new request for these authorizations. This is the final step on all of the prior authorizations of the board.
Doug?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Supervisor Straub. So, we're gonna pay taxes on this land. We're gonna hope that we sell it down the road. How long has this current landowner had it for sale? If you've looked at the designation of this land, some of it's wetlands, some of it's timber, I've looked at the designation of all the different acres. There's a reason why it hasn't been developed. Not anybody wants it right now. Now, could that change, John, down the road? Hey, it could change a year from now, it could change 20 years from now. Okay? I don't want to put the taxpayers in the position of buying things in anticipation of something being sold down the road. And all the while, every year, we'll be getting a tax bill from Washington County. We'll be paying that tax bill year after year after year. And so, you know, a lot of times we do things at the county and we anticipate, well, this may work out great. Trash plant, maybe not a good example. Maybe the county jail, maybe a number of other issues. So I guess I get a little frustrated when we always anticipate the best, and it ends up not happening the way we thought it was going to happen, and we end up getting stuck with a lot of bills that we shouldn't have. So, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. John?
we've done this back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, but I'll just repeat again that it's very likely that upon request, that Washington County would give us a variance from the taxes on this because they benefit from the airport improvement as well. And the other thing is that as the airport improves, these properties will become more marketable.
Doug, does that help if they give us a break, tax break?
Um,
Does that make it, does that
I think
flip
we're
your,
pretty much agree on that. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think John and I will agree to disagree on the potential of that being sold down the road, but,
Chairman, just for the record.
I apologize,
Go
Ron.
back and forth.
Just for the record, I think it's important whether it's the county or municipality, Doug, or the state of New York, the price on the acquisition of property is established by appraisals. Not only our appraisers, but their appraisers. There's a process. That's, no one in this room set the price as to what the value of that property was. This process established it. And in fact, unless there's somebody in this room that's a certified appraiser that I'm unaware of that participated in this process, I don't believe that's the case. That's number one. Number two, the fact is municipalities own property and assets in other municipalities and other counties. Many municipalities, Doug, have reservoirs that don't exist within their municipal boundaries. In fact, they have reservoirs that don't even exist within the county that they're located in. And that happens. And it's not as unique, perhaps, a thing as you might.
Well, I didn't say it was unique, but
As you might go for it, as strange a thing as you might envision. So I just wanted to state that for the record, that the prices of these things are established by certified appraisers as part of a process.
Could I ask for a motion to get it on the floor? By John, second by Evelyn. Any more discussion? Travis?
I appreciate that we don't want to go over old ground, and I won't trouble you now with going over this old ground, which I've talked about before. But this is actually new old ground. This problem with mitigating the tree penetrations on runways 12 and 30 was already dealt with by the board in committee, passed through the full board, and a resolution was passed that took care of it unanimously, that took care of this. I bring to your attention resolution number 101 of 2011, and it's not very long, but I'll just read pieces of it. Runway 12 and 30 to mitigate, resolve that the airport manager submit a grant to the FAA, New York State Department of Transportation, for the construction and installation of a precision approach path indicator, PAPI, for runway 12 and 30 to mitigate for tree penetrations on runway approaches. And it was approved unanimously, I think in February of 2011, and it takes care of that issue. It came from discussions that Don DeGraw, the previous airport manager, had with the FAA and with CNS engineers. And I have a document here, and I'll provide all of this to Joan, because I'd like this included in the record today. That was on June 2nd of 2009. Representatives from CNS engineers met with Don DeGraw. It says that Don DeGraw's preference is to use PAPIs to raise the glide angle over fixed obstructions on runways 1230. CNS to calculate GP and TCH based on obstructions to remain. FAA has verbally approved CNS to verify this approach with Don. No threshold displacements or relocations are planned. So you do have, in fact, a resolution that was passed by the full board And, until you deal with, that, already passed resolution, I don't think you should be considering putting further resolutions, up for them. I also bring to your attention that the next issue to be discussed here, I believe, is to put a PAPI, on this land, and, that's an additional $80,000. I would certainly concur and agree with, doing that, and I think $80,000 is a cost-effective way to, get rid of this problem, and, you have my support on that. Thank you.
Ross?
Mr. Chairman, I'm familiar with that correspondence that, Mr. Whitehead is referring to. The FAA and our engineers did look at raising the angle of precision approach path indicators, the visual approach guidance to those runways back in 2009. That analysis determined that the approach path that would be needed to clear the existing obstructions, namely the trees, would be too steep and would be unsafe and is not permissible. That is how we ended up changing the project to include acquisition and tree removal. The need for the PAPIs in the design phase of this next project is to mitigate existing obstructions that are not practical to be removed, namely Mr. Seacart's house will be an obstruction that will remain. We're not going to propose lowering his house to mitigate the obstructions. Instead, we can raise the angle of the PAPI slightly to avoid that impact on the runway 30 end. Similarly, on the 12 end of the runway, there are numerous trees in the Rolling Hills residential neighborhood. We are not proposing tree removal in those neighborhoods either. The PAPI on that end of the runway will mitigate those obstructions. We are able to raise the angle, the glide path angle on that end of the runway to clear those trees safely.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, on the glide slopes that were used for this new analysis, what type of aircraft glide slopes were used to come up with that conclusion? Like there's 4 types of aircraft, correct?
Yeah, this is a PAPI, precision approach path indicator. The standard glide path is a 3-degree glide path. Typically, you can't go more than a 3.2 degree increase on the glide path to clear obstructions because it's visual, it's not an instrument, so regardless of what aircraft is being used, it's visual guidance and has no bearing on what aircraft is using it.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't, so for the planes that use that, jets aren't flying into that runway, correct?
No, jets can fly into that runway if they desire.
They can?
Absolutely.
But it's not advised.
I wouldn't say that.
I think
It's entirely up to the pilot in command which runway.
so anybody can fly into that, any jet can choose to fly in that runway.
Any jet that is capable of utilizing that runway.
Okay.
Based on their performance calculations.
All right, because my understanding was, 2% or less of the aircraft use that runway, and prop planes use it, on a regular basis out of that 2%, and they have different, glide slopes that are steeper than, jets that are coming faster and harder. So it doesn't matter, it's just, anybody can fly in there, so it's just one general status of, glide slope that is used for this analysis, regardless of aircraft type. Is that what I
don't perform the
understand?
analysis. If you would like, I can certainly, speak to our consultants to
Okay.
provide more detailed information on how that glide path, that PAPI angle is established. I'd be happy to speak with CNS, but,
Okay. Yeah,
if they require additional effort,
I'd like to see that, thank you.
Harrison? Just state name and for the record.
Harrison Freer, Queensbury. Yeah, so jets do fly and land on that runway, mainly as a crosswind runway. It's not as stressed as the main runway, so certain large jets with small tires can't land on that runway, but jets do land there mainly when we have a westerly wind. That's the reason that it's slanted that way, because the prevailing wind is out of the west at certain times of the year. And I'm not sure where the 2% number came from. That seems low to me. However, that runway is used routinely for crosswind training for student pilots as well. So the notion that jets don't land on that is incorrect. They would normally land on the main north-south runway if it was dry and there wasn't a crosswind. The other advantage of having two runways is that if there's an accident on, the main runway, we do have an alternative of having a second runway, which nearly all, substantial airports, do have a second runway. Ours happens to be crosswind, but it has the advantage of not closing the whole airport down, if there's an accident or some kind of, disturbance on the main north-south runway.
Harrison, a couple questions. How important is crosswind training for a pilot?
It's required training and required proficiency in order to get any license, private pilot, recreational pilot, commercial pilot. Crosswind takeoffs and landing is a required training item and a required proficiency demonstration for your practical test.
If a pilot was training on that and there was obstructions that need to be removed, does that come into play as far as issues with training someone and what could possibly happen?
The tree removal obstruction is a normal course of meeting the FAA safety requirements for runways and prevention areas. Yeah, those trees look scary to a young kid when you're, practicing crosswind engine out kind of stuff. But it's not that's not the driving factor for, I believe, this effort. I just wanted to make the board and committee understand that the 2% number, I don't know where it came from, and even if it is as low as 2%, there are vital tasks that occur there, and that jets do land there on a routine basis.
Do you think $56,000 the county share to obtain this land and take care of the obstructions is excessive to
No.
achieve that safety?
No.
And that's coming from a taxpayer and a pilot?
A taxpayer and a pilot, an instructor pilot who does training at that runway.
Thank you.
Mark?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just have one quick question and a comment. Absolutely agree on the instructions, gotta remove those. Totally agree. On the, jet traffic, thank you for clarifying that. You're out there a lot, you're, out at the airport a lot. Just a guess, how many jets go in and out of that runway? Do you have any idea?
I can tell you, I've seen jets take off and land there, Mark. Again, if the runway's wet and there's a crosswind, it makes sense if they're not going a long distance to always take off into the wind. I mean, aircraft carriers are short runways by design, and they always face into the wind when they're doing takeoffs and landings. So, as a pilot, I can't give you a number, but I've seen plenty of jets both take off and land there, mainly because of crosswind on a wet type day.
Safely? I mean, obviously they're taking off and landing safely on that. Because it's short.
So.
I mean, it's a short runway. Okay.
4,000 feet. See, that's one of the. I don't want to take all the people's time, but if you have a 15
We have a lot of time here, as you can see, don't worry.
If you had a 15, if I had a 15 knot headwind, landing on that crosswind runway, my landing distance would be substantially less than it would be on the main runway. So, if 15 knots is roughly a pretty good crosswind. So if it's 20 knot if it's a 20 knot crosswind on the north-south and you land mostly into that 20 knot headwind, then your landing distances are substantially less.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying.
And just lastly, what I see when I go to FAA, et cetera, they have pictures of airports all over the state, and all of them have two runways intersecting perpendicularly. Is that the norm, I guess, because their winds change?
No, it was the norm, Dan. Now, a lot of airports will have two parallel runways, because back when this airport was built on a swamp, which is now wetlands, the crosswind capability of airplanes wasn't as good as it is now. So many modern runways will have, or airports, Manassas, where I trained last, had parallel runways. And so that's a more modern, it's taken advantage, and they don't have a westerly wind component, if you will. So depending on the location, they actually don't like that cross design today in modern standards because it causes a problem with that hot intersection spot where, you know, people could be taken off or landing on more than one. So that's an old design that we live with, and it's very capable, but it's not the most desired standard.
Thank you. Travis?
I'd just like to tell you that 2% number did come from the EA that's out there for the 119 extension. And while I don't agree with every piece of data that's in that either, it is in that EA, and you can look that up. I do appreciate that jets land there, and it is interesting to note that runway is 1,000 foot shorter than the one that absolutely has to be extended another 1,000 feet. So that's a difference of 2,000 feet right there, which I find curious. The other thing that I'd like to point out is that these obstructions were based on a 20-to-1 slope, glide slope, and that the preferred glide slope for a Cessna 172 on landing is 9-to-1. So it is, you know, more than twice as steep as that, and these trees that on the 20-to-1 would be clipped by 10 feet or so are going to be well under, you know, this approaching plane coming in, a Cessna 172. A higher performing plane would be a Cirrus SR-22, but its glide slope is recommended at 9.6 to 1, still less than, you know, still twice as steep as the clearing angle that we're talking about. And I'd just like to ask, when Ross does have an opportunity to provide the information that says where the FAA disallowed Mr. DeGraw's suggestion here, that he would provide that to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call the question. We have a motion, a second on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
So moved. Okay, Ross.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next resolution request item is related to the same runway, same project. This is for a grant application with the FAA New York State DOT for the runway 30N obstruction mitigation and runway 12 and 30 PAPI installation final design. Dollar amount involved, $80,000 with a local match of $4,000. Copy of the program narrative is included on page 10 of your packet. And this will be the design for the actual tree removal for that property that we just discussed acquiring.
Okay, could I have a motion to get it on the floor? Evelyn, second by Ron. Discussion. Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, next we have a resolution request to apply for a grant with the FAA, New York State DOT. This one is to require snow removal equipment and ARF gear, aircraft rescue firefighting gear. The total dollar amount involved is $675,000 with a local match of about $34,000. On page 12 of your packet is a copy of the program narrative for this project. The ARF gear is the firefighting gear, what would be the airport equivalent of turnout gear. It has a serviceable life of 5 years. We're just looking to replace that gear and purchase an entry saw as well with the project. The snow removal component of this project is to replace 2 pieces of equipment at the airport. As everyone is aware, the airport has some highly specialized snow removal equipment out at the airport. Recently, in 2011, we acquired a new snow blower for the airport. FAA calls it a rotary plow. We refer to it as a giant snow blower. Essentially, that piece of equipment is capable of removing 5 tons of snow from the airport per hour and casting snow about 150 to 200 feet into the infield. That piece of equipment is actually essential because it prevents the creation of hazardous snowbanks for aircraft along the aircraft movement areas. The other piece of equipment that's highly specialized is included in this project, and that is the runway broom. We have a large swath runway sweeper, which enables us to get down to a bare pavement condition at the airport for adequate braking action for safety for the aircraft. As you know, the airport is not allowed to use road salt on the airfield to remove snow and ice. There are some very expensive FAA-approved ice melting materials that we can purchase. For example, we can purchase this anhydrous sodium acetate, which costs about $3,800 for 2 metric tons. That's enough product to allow us to de-ice the runway one time, only 150 feet wide. So as you can imagine, we use that very, very sparingly. As a matter of fact, this past winter, we were able to use no product and achieve bare pavement because we have the appropriate equipment to do the job. What we're proposing here is actually something a little bit unique, especially for our size airport, and that is to combine 2 pieces of equipment into one. If you look on page 13 of your packet, you'll see a photograph of the piece of equipment that we're proposing to purchase. This is a combination plow and runway broom with air blast, mid-mount. This will enable us to accomplish 2 things. One, it will be eliminating 1 piece of equipment from our snow removal fleet, and we'll have 1 less piece of equipment to operate and maintain, and it'll enable us to be more efficient with 1 operator performing 2 functions. Any questions?
Ron?
Yeah, this unit back here, the trailer unit, I see, is that an exhaust coming up into it?
No, that's the air blast. That shoots a high volume blast of air off to the side to help aid in the snow removal.
I see, and this unit here is some type of compressor?
That's the second engine. There's 2 engines on the machine.
2 engines.
A drive engine and then an engine to run the broom and air blast.
I see.
Which is the similar setup for our existing broom. It has 2 engines as well.
Doug?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ross, because we're Part 139 designation, does that require us to have different type of equipment that we were not Part 139?
It does, the only required equipment that we have as Part 139 is the firefighting equipment. What the Part 139 enables us to do is be eligible for something like this. Otherwise, we would not be eligible for a runway broom.
And Part 139 allows us to have commercial flights, correct?
Correct.
How many commercial flights we had in the last 20 years?
None.
None? Okay. So we've had no commercial
You're
flights.
referring to
Charter
scheduled,
flights,
yeah,
right.
you're referring to scheduled airlines, I assume.
Well,
There
I'm
are
just
other types of
throwing it out.
commercial
There's
flights,
others.
like there's charter flights that operate under a Part 135 certificate. I don't know how many of those occur. You know, you could certainly request that information, you know, from the FBO operator, but I don't know of many that have occurred in my tenure.
Okay, so we really, okay, so I'm just thinking from a cost standpoint, if we did not have the 139 designated, designation, there could be maybe some savings out of the airport. Would that be a fair statement or no?
There would be some limited amount of savings. I don't know that the trade-off in, you know, some of the safety components and equipment that allow us to be more safe is worth it.
Do you know if Saratoga is part of 139?
They are not.
So they wouldn't be required under the FAA regulations to have certain type of equipment. They'd have to have the basic type of equipment, but not the equipment that is a little more costly because of the 139 designation. Is that correct?
The way it works, the airport like Saratoga is required to keep their airport open during all weather conditions. They have different levels of equipment that they're eligible to acquire with airlines. For example, you know, one airport may be only eligible for 1 plow, where a busier airport like ours may be eligible for 2 plows because the need to remove the snow faster, or maybe climate reasons, you know, because, you know, one airport has a greater annual snowfall than another airport. There's a lot of factors that go into play. There's an advisory circular that will guide you through the equipment acquisition process, and that is available right on the FAA's website if you wanted to take a look at that guidance document.
All right, thanks.
Ron?
Yeah, FAA must like this piece of equipment, or I doubt they'd be funding it. Have you talked to any other airport administrators about this specific piece of equipment, or anyone?
Yes, Elmira, Corning Regional Airport has a few of them. I've talked to them about their equipment. They love it. It's a remarkable piece of equipment, does a great job. It's just a recently approved piece of equipment for FAA funding. Elmira was kind of the test subject. It's only recently in October that the FAA included language specific to this type of equipment. You may recall last year we wanted to acquire just a broom. And that's because this piece of equipment wasn't available for funding under the grant program. It's only recently that option now exists.
I think the question regarding the, Part 139 and any potential savings if we drop the 139 has come up in the past. I just wanted to, give Ross a chance. I think we talked about the expenses regarding the, airport, rescue and firefighting specific to the Part 139 is we train the guys each year. They go to some training.
Yes.
I think that's a few $1,000s a year.
Yeah.
And then the equipment cost, which is, grant eligible, obviously, remember, I remember I saw the quotes or the estimate for this RF equipment, it's a few $1,000s for this.
For the actual equipment that we're
Yeah, or
purchasing?
6,000 maybe
I mean,
total.
we're talking about turnout gear, scuba bottles,
It's all personal equipment, it's not any,
personal protective equipment. It was like $10,000.
Right, and that's FAA grant, so we got 5%, so if it's $10,000, we've got $500 into that. The other thing I wanna make a point of is the Part 139 designation when it comes to equipment like this really does put the airport at a higher priority. And FAA is constrained like every other agency as far as where they focus the money to. A piece of equipment like this that's on page 13 would be beneficial to any airport, including Saratoga. And, based on some of the photos I've seen, that they could use a piece of equipment like this. But the fact is, they would be at a lower priority for funding of it through the FAA. And that Part 139 does allow us a higher seat in that priority chain for the limited FAA grants that come through.
Okay. Just a quick question, what does Saratoga use to plow their roadways? Do they have, you don't know? They just use plows?
I don't know.
Okay, can we have, Harrison?
Sorry, I just wanna make clear from a pilot standpoint that the Glens Falls, airport runways are, much better plowed and in better condition than, Saratoga's are all winter. There's no comparison. Jeff, you've seen pictures. I've flown at both airports and the Glens Falls, Warren County Airport, snow removal is far superior and gives a lot of options to pilots. And snow removal, it's one shit wipes out 100 attaboys, and just look at what happened at LaGuardia, I rest my case.
The piece of equipment that this is replacing, how old is that? What's the history on there?
We're actually replacing two pieces of equipment. One is a 1987 Sweepster. It's a 27-year-old piece of equipment, well beyond its serviceable life. Finding parts for it is very difficult. The other piece of equipment that we're replacing is one of our plow trucks. That plow truck is a 2004. It's 11, will be 12 years old. FAA considers the useful life on a piece of snow removal equipment to be 10 to 12 years. We're consolidating, we're bringing it into one machine.
Okay. Could we have, Rachel?
Oh, just a quick question. So we would have to be buying new equipment anyway, given the, expiration date on the two that you currently have. So by being able to obtain those grant fundings, we're saving quite a bit of money to the county, is what I'm hearing first and foremost. And secondly, what do we do once we expire the old equipment? What happens to that?
Well, the plow truck that we have, we would pass it on to DPW. It's in relatively good condition by comparison for equipment of similar age, mainly because it stays on the airport. It's only used during the winter months, and it never sees salt. So that equipment will be a nice piece of equipment for DPW to use for other reasons throughout the county.
Jeffrey?
I'll just add that we've done that with airport equipment repeatedly. And as Ross said, the conditions that they operate in are much different than the highway equipment. So I can tell you my highway foremen love getting a piece of equipment from the airport, no matter how old it is. They don't want your broom, Ross, I think that's gonna get auctioned. But
Right.
But we have repurposed every piece of equipment that had any useful life left in it, directly over into highways or other divisions.
Yeah, our old fire truck became the new welding truck for
It's the prettiest welding truck in the county by far.
So again, saving money to the rest of the county for things that we would end up having to purchase from the airport. Great.
Could I have a motion to bring it to the floor? Motion by Ron, seconded by Rachel. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, next item on the agenda is a resolution request to authorize the chairman of the board to execute a revised, state contract Schedule A1. This is for the 2012 ARF building expansion project that is long since over. This is, some housekeeping. This is essentially required. The FAA and the state finally got some paperwork issues straightened out. This will enable the state to finally issue us our final reimbursement for that project. It's really, and enable us to close the project out.
Any questions for us, Ron? Motion, second by Evelyn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, next item is a resolution request to authorize the airport manager to execute a federal categorical exclusion form, a CADX form. This is the environmental document. It's the federal environmental approval process for a future, crack sealing and pavement repair project anticipated for 2016. On page 27, or page 17 of your document is a copy of the CADX form.
Questions? Okay, motion to bring it to the floor. John, second. Evelyn? Need a minute to review anything? Anybody want to take a minute?
It was important for any, maintenance program.
Okay. Committee's good with it. We'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, under the Section 4 referral and pending items on the agenda, next 2 or 3 weeks, we can anticipate receiving the New York State DOT grant agreement for the upgrades to the aviation fuel farm. As everyone is aware, we've been notified that we will be receiving the grant to upgrade the airport fuel farm, replace the old tanks. Latest news is that we can expect the actual agreement in the 2 to 3 weeks, and we can begin work on that. That will necessitate the establishment of the capital project and a new contract with McFarland Johnson for the design, bidding, and inspection services for that project.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to,
Yep.
you know, some of these projects, we're gonna try and, give the committee and the board, members present, a little bit of a heads up, because we don't like to do, and we do very few, out-of-committee requests that go directly to the board. This is one of those projects where, you know, if it's okay with the committee, and the committee has consensus that if we get this grant agreement, prior to the board meeting, we may wanna consider bringing this to, either to finance if we receive the documents in time, or to the board meeting for consideration, because we do have a current operational need at the airport. We do have an additional expense right now with a temporary tank. We've done fine through the summer. We haven't gotten a lot of complaints or anything from the FBO or pilots. However, as we go into, you know, spring and early summer, we will get, there is an increase in traffic. And, I just wanna throw it out there, if we get these documents soon, this is 100%, covered, project, either through, it's 95% grant, right? Or 90% for this one?
Yeah.
Oh, this is a state grant only, and we have the 10%, local match in our transfers for us. That's where that local match would come through. At this point, if we could move forward on it, it would, and A, it would save money in the end, two, it would meet the operational need at the airport going into the summer season.
Mark?
I'll move that.
Okay, could I have a second? Ron? Any other discussion, any questions for Jeff?
Just, if it turns out that, you also have to, you can't come to finance because of the timing, then, one or both of you need to be at the board meeting to make sure that
Sure.
any questions, you can deal with
Yeah.
any questions.
Okay, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Okay, under the information for discussion review section, I want to give the committee an update. The soil contamination at the new airport restaurant site, all the soil sampling is done, the testing has been done, contracts are in place. The soil removal, contaminated soil removal will begin tomorrow, should take 2 days at most, we hope, should be done by Friday, no later than Friday, depending on any issues that may or may not come up. We don't anticipate any based on our testing, we had DEC on site. The total cost for the soil remediation right now, projected to be under $4,000 total cost, for that soil remediation, and by Friday, we should be able to turn the site back over to Mr. Skimmerhorn to resume construction.
From a budgetary standpoint, I think we can absorb that. We did have concerns regarding this contamination. Obviously, we didn't anticipate it, wasn't budgeted. But as of right now, I think we're in good shape, and we'll certainly be watching our contract codes as we go through the year and keep the committee apprised if we start running short.
Did I hear that number, $4,000?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, oh, break. We had to have caught a break there. How much soil had to be removed, do you know just offhand?
We're estimating 4 tandem loads.
4 tandem?
80 to 100 tons.
Okay, the next item, I just wanted to let the committee know that we did complete the final tree removal in the approach end to runway 1. We have submitted those obstruction removals to the FAA for removal from their database, which will enable our approach minima to runway 1 to be lowered. That process could take some time. At the earliest, we're looking at October for a new minima to be published by the FAA. Could be as late as December. It's usually a quarterly thing. Information's been submitted, project's complete, and we're moving on.
So Ross, is that the decision altitude?
Yeah, it'll impact the decision height as well as the visibility.
Okay.
Yep.
Jeff?
I don't think Ross mentioned, those final tree removals were done by airport staff.
Thank you, Rick.
And just an FYI, on April 24th, the airport's wildlife management, hazard management consultant will be on site to perform our annual wildlife management mitigation and firearm safety training for airport personnel. That's all I have for committee.
Okay, thank you. Privilege of floor. Anyone have any business come before the committee? Bud?
Not related to this committee, but you've got a full complement of the board members for LDC, and there's been some confusion about when the meeting was going to be, because I was on the board today. The LDC meeting starts at 12:15. So if you guys can stay, appreciate it.
Ron?
I just remind the chair that as soon as weather's permitting, we had talked about doing a walk around at the airport, maybe even a walking meeting. I don't know that I suppose we could be upstairs in the conference room if we needed to, but I wouldn't object to even a walking kind of meeting. I think that's would be a good thing to have.
Okay.
I object at the moment to a walking meeting.
We'll get a golf cart.
Are you gonna push me around?
We'll put you on a sled.
We got a brand new
Alright.
sweeper, we'll put you on
Okay. Anyone else have anything come before the board? Motion to adjourn.
Sweep around.
Evelyn,
and
second by
maybe-
Fred. All in favor?
Tired.
Aye.
All right.